They in a court of law, they have testified that Mr. Wingate has testimony that he did not certify because they did not do signature verification in Fulton County. They decided not to follow the law and just approved every ballot without signature verification.
I believe the way that the statute contemplates this dilemma being resolved is the provision in 493 that they certify the results justly without regard to any fraud or error. In other words, they certify a result they know is correct. They exclude results that they cannot truly and honestly certify are correct. I think that's what the statute contemplates.
And
But
I would emphasize 21-2-70 in the code that the superintendent or the board they're advised, they're given the authority and the duty to inspect systematically and thoroughly the conduct of the primaries and the elections.
Board Member Gazal, the statutory structure for the role of election superintendents to tabulate, compute, canvass, and certify the returns implies discretion at virtually every level. And so it would be, I think, an error of legal analysis to focus on just one parenthetical phrase in subsection I to conclude that there's no discretion. I mean, after all, the boards are expected to vote on whether they certify, and the fact that they're expected to vote necessarily implies that they're exercising discretion. So there's an antecedent duty to come up with the correct number and then certify it. And if they find a discrepancy, they're to report it out. The hypothetical that you posed, we have to follow the statute on that. And the statute says they shall certify the returns justly to the best of their ability. And if they're not able to do that because of a discrepancy, then they're to report that to the district attorney and post their returns, and then it goes from there. But post-certification remedies are an inadequate substitute for the antecedent duty to get the numbers correct in the first place.
Hearing no further discussion, we will now have a vote. I will call each individual member by seniority. Member Gazal, how do you vote?
Nay.
Member Johnson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member Jeffries, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member Jeffries votes aye. Member King, how do you vote?
Aye.
The chair will exercise his right to vote and will vote nay. The motion carries 3-2.
War Room, Gwinnett County. The people's voice, keeping you informed. War Room, Gwinnett County. The people's voice. Thank you for tuning in to War Room, Gwinnett County. I'm your host, Antonio Jones. What you just saw was a recap of the Georgia State Election Board. The chairman, who was appointed by the governor, voted in opposition. If you guys are just tuning into this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. We got a pretty stacked up show today. We got a few guests. But as we said in the last, and you'll hear us say this over and over again, when President Trump was here, I guess going on 3.5 weeks ago, and he kind of sent a shot across the bow at the governor, what he did was he put people in position to force them to make a decision. You know, President Trump has, maybe like over 1 million something people that he has to kind of watch over when he's in office. That's a lot of people. And I understand it's never a convenient time to be having what we classify as infighting inside of the party. But if we don't do it, we allow the bad actors to get away with what they're doing or their inactions. So each and every person in the state of Georgia, and quite frankly in the country, we're going to have to make a decision. We're going to decide to side with the uniparty, the establishment globalist, and the things that they're trying to do to undermine our rights that's given to us by the Constitution, or we're going to make the choice to fight the establishment and get things done for the future of this country that will provide opportunities for our children. And it's our time, it's our turn to do this. But like I said in the video, we got 3 board members that voted to actually, at the end of each night, and this is what it was about. I call it the reconciliation rule or whatever on the precinct level. So when you first walk in, you check in on the poll pad. Okay, so that's one checkpoint. You take they give you this card or whatever, then you go and put it in this machine and you select all your people that you're going to vote for. Okay, then when you hit print, you go and put it in the tabulator or whatever that counts the machine. There is a display on the top of that, and it has a number of the amount of the supposed amount of people who have actually voted for the day. And when you put your ballot into that machine, it should go up by 1. So at the end of the night, they're supposed to synchronize and reconcile that number of people that actually checked in when you first go in and get a peep of your ID, the number that's on top of that machine that you put your ballot into, and that all those numbers should match the actual number of physical ballots inside of the machine. So let me pull up an article that's on the Federalist, and let's go through it. All right. So, all right. This article is by Mark Davis. So he posed the question that Georgia's Brad Raffensperger illegally changed absentee ballot rules in 2020. Matter of fact, let me start with another one from, I think we had one up from Kevin Munkler. I don't know if I can find it. I know I had it up a few minutes ago. We should have retweeted it. Okay. There's Marley's tweet. We see that. All right, let's see here. Let me just look. Let's search for Kevin Munkler, because he posted something in regards to this that was pretty specific. Okay, here he is right here. So Kevin Munkler is one of the freedom fighters, we call it, for election integrity here in Georgia. So let me see. Okay, here we go. He basically said the Secretary of State is against counting and wants the county to blindly trust the electronic voting machine results without counting the quantity of paper ballots and comparing that total to the number counted by the machine and to the list of voters who checked in. Oh my goodness. That's right. There is no such list. The Secretary of State is opposed to reconciliation that CISA and Dominion actually even recommended. You know who else is opposed to conventional counting methods? Enron. Tell the Secretary of State to go and pound sand. This wasn't his words, but we got to keep it clean. Counties have to follow the law, and he cannot alter or waive the law. It's a constitutional thing. So there are some bad actors in my view, in our view, in the state of Georgia, that's what it appears to be against doing the small things for election integrity. We saw a lot coming out of the governor's office, definitely a lot coming from the Secretary of State. The Attorney General said that he would prosecute and go after, election crimes and fraud and everything like that. But it seems like since he's backpedaled. So these are all Republican representation. And again, if you don't like what President Trump said about Kemp, 3 weeks ago, then you don't have to look no further than what we just showed you right here. There is a reason that is going on. And we have to make a decision to clean up our elections. So let's go through the other article here by Mark Davis, and his article is on the Federalist. And did Georgia's Brad Raffensperger illegally change absentee ballot rules in 2020? This is his question. And this article is from August 21st, which is today. So let's go through a little bit of this. The people who call the 2020 election the quote, most secure, unquote, in history have spent the past several years slandering as election deniers anyone who questions the election administration. But others remain frustrated by the many last-minute changes to election laws and processes that occurred shortly before that presidential election contest. Changes that in some cases may have been illegal. I think he's referring to the consent decree between Stacey Abrams and the governor. When the Constitution is very clear about who decides the manner in which elections occur, and that is the state legislature. But thank goodness for the few brave souls who are trying to at least combat some of these vulnerabilities with getting rules passed at the state election board. In Georgia, the state election board unanimously adopted a rule change in May 2020, citing COVID-19. It allowed the counties to open and scan absentee ballots up to 3 weeks before the November 2020 general election and several other elections in the 2020 election cycle. Brian Kemp had declared a public health state of emergency on March 13th in 2020 and called for a special session of the General Assembly to ratify this action through joint resolution, which the legislature approved. Then, in a move that remains controversial, Secretary of State Raffensperger announced on March 24th of 2020 that he would be mailing absentee ballots request forms to every Georgia voter, a number he placed at 6.9 million. So the governor can call a special session to get this done, but with all the cyber attacks and everything like that concerned with voter rolls, we can't call the legislature back into session to move this thing to hand-marked paper ballots and eliminate the threat of these machines. All right, so there's an emergency rule got approved. So during the May 18, 2020 state election board meeting, Raffensperger's general counsel, Ryan Germany, argued in favor of the proposed rule change. He told the board that 1.4 million absentee ballot applications had been accepted. Most had already been delivered, and 360,000 had already been returned to the elections officials. I quote, "I think the past presidential preference primary, general primary, there was 36,000 total absentee vote by mail ballots cast in the entire election. So we're already at well above in orders of magnitude, according to Germany." Summarizing his argument for the emergency rule, he said, with this many ballots coming in, if there's going to be a way to get results anytime quickly, the election, we might need to allow counties to start processing these ballots early. Is this a violation of law? But the passage of that rule by the board, which was chaired by Raffensperger at the time, violated a Georgia statute requiring absentee ballots be kept safely, unopened, and stored. A legal filing by Georgia voter Tim Adderholt argues. Adderholt cites OCGA 21-2-386, claiming that for 97 years, from 1924 until the law was amended in March 2021 by the passage of SB 202. You know, that's the easy to vote, hard to cheat, gimmick in my view that they pushed. This law required that the board of registrars or absentee ballot clerk shall keep safely, unopened, and stored in a manner that will prevent the tampering and unauthorized access to all official absentee ballots received from absentee electors prior to the closing of the polls. He also cites a June 26, 1980 opinion of the Attorney General on the law, which confirmed that. We asked for a comment. Mike Hassinger, Public Information Officer of the Secretary of State, responded, "We can't comment on any pending litigation or legal matters." Adderholt told me that if the board had relied on some unspecified emergency power when it adopted the rule, he had not yet heard that the argument in any legal proceedings. Those began in December 2020 when Adderholt filed a complaint in the Superior Court in Cherokee County, which he lives, to prevent the county from opening and scanning ballots. All right, let's skip to this last section. Voters need to know if the law was violated. Another Georgia attorney, shout out to Harry McDougal. Harry McDougal says the emergency powers given to Kemp in the name of COVID did not extend to the Secretary of State or the state election board, and that as a basic matter of administration law, regulations may not contradict the statutes under which they are promulgated. The rulemaking authority granted by OCGA 21-2-31 requires that the rules be consistent with the law. The regulation for early opening and scanning of absentee ballots was plainly contrary to the state statute governing the handling of absentee ballots and therefore clearly unlawful. So basically, of course, everybody knows that COVID was the instrument for a lot of election law violations, but a lot of other law violations. But we're speaking about elections right now. And that's the drop boxes, all the chain of custody violations and things like that to happen. And it seems that, how can we trust, the illegal opening of the ballots, and this just puts everything in an opportunity for fraud, because the machines themselves are vulnerable. If people are not following the election law, then what's the chances that they'll follow the laws subsequent to those things? The governors clearly, violate the law back then with the consent decree that violate the constitutional law. And it's just like violation after violation after violation. And for our leadership, some of the guys in our leadership to go against this rule change for reconciliation just seems a bit suspect to us. But you guys stick around. We're going to go ahead and get our guest in here right after this break.
Accelerate your business goals and brand presence on the World Wide Web by logging on to safewayhost.store to purchase domain names, web hosting, email hosting, SSL, and more. We have 24/7 customer service and support available to our clients. Get started today so you can achieve your business goals by increasing your web presence. Log on to safewayhost.store today. That's safewayhost.store.
War Room, Gwinnett County, the people's voice, keeping you informed. War Room, Gwinnett County, the people's voice. All right, thank you guys for sticking around. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. We're going to be hammering away as much as we can, getting people in here who are versed in their field as far as election integrity. There's so many cyber attacks that are happening just across the world. Did you see the blackout, I guess, during the Olympics? There's always something coming out. And we're not, from what we see right now, we're not going to be able to move away from these machines in Georgia. But all of the efforts mean something, just like the rule changes that just happened in the state election board. Thank you to those people who have put in countless hours, who have brought data, all the attorneys and everybody that's participated. So right now, we're going to bring in a guest, and that's Marley Hornik, and she has a organization called United Sovereign Americans. So welcome to the War Room, Marley.
Thank you. Thanks, Antonio. It's great to be here.
All right, so we see that you guys are kind of dug in on the voter roll situation across a number of states. Before we get into that, can you tell people a little bit about yourself and the organization that you have?
Yeah, United Sovereign Americans is an all-volunteer organization that's been working since really August of 2023 to come up with a national way to discuss the issues that we're having in elections everywhere. It can't just be a Maricopa issue or a Fulton County issue or a Delaware issue or a Wisconsin issue. Really, it's a national issue. And we debride our own concerns when we allow them to be fractured into pieces and argue each piece separately. So that's really what United Sovereign Americans is about. And it's true that we focus on auditing voter registration lists, the statewide voter registration list, but we do it in a holistic manner so that instead of just coming up with some concerns about potentially invalid or illegal registration records, we're also tracking their voting histories, and we're tracking reconciliation, which I heard you speak about of an election, which is a critical part of the process, can't be overlooked. And then looking at, well, what's the error rate? How are we doing basically? What's our scorecard in terms of actual performance nationally on election validity, which is a different idea than election integrity. Elections really can't have integrity intrinsically, right? They don't have the ability to make moral decisions on their own. Humans have to do that. And so what we're concerned about is, did the election meet the requirements and standards set by US Congress to uphold our fundamental civil right to choose our representatives? So that's a little introduction to United Sovereign Americans. We just have just extraordinary, determined, dedicated volunteers, like so many of the great people in Georgia who've been working tirelessly for decades, including some of the folks you mentioned: Joe Rossi, Kevin Moncla, David Cross, Brian Pritchard, and I'm thinking of one. Oh,
Yes, whenever you start naming names, you always
Garland. I'm thinking of
leave
Garland.
somebody off. Yeah, Garland Favorito.
And Mark
That's
too. You
one.
were reading Mark's article. I mean, just people who have made such an incredible difference to our country over their tireless efforts.
So the information that did you examine like 2020, or is this just stuff that you've pulled in like in the last year or so? Where's the information that you're working on in data? What is it based off?
Sure. Actually, we took a really unique approach because what we wanted to do was take an actual measurement, not just discuss. I mean, I think we've done that. We've gone over and over what kinds of anomalies there are, what the problems are, that they're numerous. We wanted to take a measurement. And one of the reasons it's important to take a measurement is that there's a law about how much error is tolerated in a federal election in order for that election to be considered reliable. And the law wasn't set by United Sovereign Americans, it was set by Congress. So that makes it necessary. So we wanted to take an accurate measurement. What really is the outcome of all of this uncertainty? And so we measured the 2022 midterm because that's the most recent federal election, obviously, in our country. And so we took all of our measurements and ran all of our audits and queries on the 2022 voter registration and participation histories. And so that's how we're able to, because we focused on a date in time, we were able to, and so, if you paint a broad brush, you can come up with lots and lots of examples, but you can never get an answer. Hey, what's the percent here? What's the bottom line, right? What's our bottom line here in terms of what's the actual performance, capacity of this system? Because if it doesn't meet the standards the system is supposed to have, then why are we using it?
Right. So what we'll get into some of the lawsuits and things that you filed in a few minutes. So as far as 2022, how bad was it based on the information and data and everything that you were able to measure and analyze? And what are some of those states that you looked particularly in?
We looked at 20 states, and those 20 states cover, even though it's a little bit less than the total, half, let's say 50% of America, they cover 338 electoral college votes. So it's actually more than half of the nation's electorate. And in those 20 states, we found at the time those elections were administered and certified, there were 29 million invalid or illegal registration records in the databases. Meanwhile, Congress has a requirement. It's necessary for reliable election to have an accurate and current voter list. We discovered by looking at the voter participation histories that 10 million of those facially invalid or illegal registration records voted, which is what the Supreme Court calls dilution of the vote. You could call it perhaps a deluge if you wanted to get really specific, but the legal term is just dilution. We discovered there were 2 million more votes tabulated than voters who voted. That's your reconciliation issue. You got 2 million ballots enter the system. No one has any idea where they came from or how they got there. There's no chain of custody. They don't track back to any voter, not even, Asterisk or Seven or one of our other, dear Patriot associates. But yet they're counted equally to your vote. And
2 million.
ultimately,
Go ahead.
Yeah,
2 million
2 million.
is a pretty large number. That's just like saying, when people work at like I don't know, down the street at the hamburger joint, and they're ringing up customers at the end of every night, that receipt tape need to match the amount of cash or whatever in the drawer, and whether
right,
it's
or they get
over
fired.
or under. Yeah, or you get fired. So whether it's
Yeah.
over or under, like 2 million, that's like looking in your drawer at the end of the night and being like, oh, hey, dude, your drawer is like $2,000 in the positive right now. There's no way. There's
or it's
something wrong
empty.
with that. And that manager will stay there with you until the next morning trying to figure out what happened.
Right,
But
'cause
we're not doing this for our
otherwise-
election. Go ahead.
Otherwise, the presumption is somebody was stealing. Somebody was sticking their hand in the kitty and taking money and putting it in their own pocket. That's the presumption in, a burger joint. Why is that not the presumption in elections? Well, actually, under the law, it is the presumption. And the United States Department of Justice has a guidebook for U.S. attorneys called Federal Prosecution of Election Offenses. I mean, it just couldn't be any clearer that people cheat in elections and you have to prevent it. And, they talk about this. The presumption when there is evidence, meaningful evidence to suggest that there may have been fraud, it may have taken place, and election fraud is defined by the DOJ as corruption of the voter registration lists, the votes and ballots themselves, or certifying false counts. That's
So it
what
would be so it would be the
you
job.
presume it was a problem.
So that book was basically written for people like in our state that we would consider like Chris Carr and the people that prosecute election fraud. Is that correct?
Correct.
It seems like there's not a lot of appetite, even with all the information. I'm just saying across the board, across all the swing states. It's like they don't want to investigate it.
No, they
And,
don't. And they were elected by this system. It's interesting because when you go back to the primary documents at the time of the American founding, there is so much discussion about the issue of elections. Who is going to be able to administer elections? Who's going to be able to determine the law regarding the elections? And the reason there's so much debate and discussion and deliberation about this is because it's the third sentence of the United States Constitution. The people shall choose their representatives. And if you don't have that operating correctly, you may not have America. And the founders, they worked for like decades deliberating over how you make a system that balances and links and balances liberty and ambition, right? We have a commercial republic. We want everybody to be brilliant. We want people to be great. We want them to be creative and ingenious and express that into our country for the benefit of themselves personally and everyone. That's beautiful. But it has to be tied to liberty. It has to be tied to the law. And when that yoke is gone and they're just going wherever they want, it's like you take that ambition and instead of people looking for honor, they start looking for privilege. They start looking for what's in it for me. And we're having this horrific struggle right now in our country where it's obvious that many people who should be responsive to these concerns and should be responsible, should be prosecuting these issues or at least investigating them sincerely. They just won't. Like you said, they just won't.
Yeah, and it's almost like a default implication because it's like the next question is, if you won't do anything about it, the next question is why? Then the next question is, after that is, are you benefiting from this? And I mean, you just laid it out. I mean, it's his third line of sentence or whatever in the Constitution. And it's because this is how the people maintain power, by the representatives that are closest to them, that, because America was a beautiful place. So naturally, people are going to want to control it, just like the state of Georgia. It's been beautiful for a long time, but it's on the fringe right now. And I believe this is a uniparty in Georgia, and this is my perspective, and they want to maintain power. They don't really care about the people and representing them, and letting their voices and everything like that be heard. Because if it was, it's like, well, come on in here. Let us show you guys, because you're all crazy running around here talking about, hey, this election was stolen. This person's illegitimate. You would just open the box up and say, hey, see, we told you this group of people over here, hey, Marley's over there at Sovereign Americans and, running around saying, hey, they got 20 million people on the voter rolls. No, let's just open it up. Let's just look at it. Let's let everybody see. Hey, did the signatures match? Is everything legitimate? But that's not the response that people are getting across this nation, and it's not the response that we're getting here in Georgia overall.
Yeah, and frankly, that attitude is actually unlawful. And that's part of why United Sovereign Americans did this research for the purpose of holding people to the law through the courts. We have to do it this way. And one of the reasons why we took all these different states and used the same approach was so we can join these lawsuits. People need to understand, the courts, the citizens, and the officials. Everybody needs to understand that the law defines a legally valid election. And that's what we're going to have in 2024. End of story. And, if we, the people, have to do this work that the government's supposed to be doing, and we have to hire these attorneys, and we have to raise this money, and we have to put these lawsuits out there, fine, but they can't have our country. That's nothing compared to where we could go if we didn't hold the line and say, this America, we love it too much. It's too special. It's too awesome. We love our children too much to just stand down and watch it slide into oblivion based on, the fact that somebody doesn't want to pick up the rug and see what the heck is hiding under it.
That's right. This is so like, this just kind of makes my blood boil, because we have to think about all the people that did all the pick and shovel work and that died for this country. And right now we got people, I'm just speaking in Georgia right now, you're putting up the thing on Facebook that's mad because Trump came to the table, or there are groups of individuals like myself and others who want to have accountability. Why do we want to have accountability? It's because of what the people did for us to be able to have this great nation and this state. And when people are not defending election integrity, they're not defending your right and your voice to put in here to be able to control the levers of power right now, because this is what this all boils down to. The election. This is who is going to control the state. And if there's somebody in there ignoring these election integrity problems, they're an issue. They're an issue for your sovereign rights and your ability to have a representative government that you selected, and they need to be legitimate. One person, one vote. Just like you said, vote delusion. I mean, this is simple,
Yes.
but it's being complicated, in my view, on purpose, in order for them bad actors to fudge this situation so that they can control power and maintain power rather than the people's voices be heard. Because the people are smart. Because when they start looking at them checkbooks and looking at these grocery bills and maybe looking at some of this overbuilding and high density construction and terrible school board members and all of that, they're smart enough to usually to vote the people out of office.
Yeah,
But
they
if
have
that ain't legitimate,
opportunity.
ain't nothing you can do about it, right?
That's what I'm saying. It's not America anymore. Who's running the ship if the United States citizens are not the ones choosing the representatives? Again, the third sentence of the Constitution, then it's really not the same thing that we signed up for. And it's our job, fool me once, Shame on you. Fool me twice. Are we going to have another 2020? I don't think so. We need to know. The American people, regardless of political affiliation, all deserve to have 100% confidence in the results of this next federal election. And that's what United Sovereign Americans is seeking to uphold. And I know there are so many other people in Georgia and across the country who share that directive from on high, that this is what we all have to do. We got to get it together. We better get along. We better get it together, and we better get this done, because there's a lot on the line, and it's not personal. We got to fix it.
That's right. So let's take a short break, and then we're going to get into the lawsuits that you filed, and let's talk about what people can do.
Accelerate your business goals and brand presence on the World Wide Web by logging on to safewayhost.store to purchase domain names, web hosting, email hosting, SSL, and more. We have 24/7 customer service and support available to our clients. Get started today so you can achieve your business goals by increasing your web presence. Log on to safewayhost.store today. That's safewayhost.store.
War Room, Gwinnett County, the people's voice, keeping you informed. War Room, Gwinnett County, the people's voice. Thank you guys for sticking around. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And let me do something real quick. All right, FAM USA. FAM USA is a manufacturing facility that makes athletic uniforms, performance wear, and children's apparel. These are all USA-made products. Some of the products they produce are uniforms for baseball, basketball, football, cheerleading, lacrosse, and volleyball. They work with a lot of high schools, middle schools, and recreational sports departments. It's a great fit for teams that are on a budget with a short turnaround. The average production is just 3 weeks. They work with brands that are looking to reshore their apparel production. They've been in business for 32 years, and they are located in Snellville. That's FAM USA. That's 2110 Fountain Square, Snellville, Georgia. That's 2110 Fountain Square, Snellville, Georgia. And that phone number is 770-982-9913. 770-982-9913. That's 770-982-9913. All right, guys. There's an apparent problem with our elections. I mean, if you look on X and just all through social media, people don't have a lot of confidence. But we do have time. Everybody needs to get out and vote. But more than that, they need to get involved, and they need to support organizations like the one that Marley is a part of, which is United Sovereign Americans. All right, so Marley, accountability. So the Constitution is very clear about elections and, how they should be run, who should administer them, who should make the changes, and all of that. So there has to be some level of accountability in action. So your organization does lawsuits, or you may have something. Can you talk about that and give us a little direction on what people can do when these violations occur and they can't get their attorney general or whomever to do anything about it?
Sure. Actually, in the Constitution, there's a couple of really interesting points, and one of them is in the 14th Amendment. Now, the 14th Amendment was ratified immediately following the Civil War, and one of the reasons it was ratified was obviously to protect Black Americans who were newly minted citizens. And of course, at that time, there was a significant population who was not happy about that. And so they passed the 14th Amendment to make sure that everyone was clear and on the same page, that Americans, regardless of any superficial qualities, were going to be protected equally under the law. There's a second concern in the 14th Amendment in Section 2 that was raised, and this goes back again to the original founding discussions at the time the Constitution was ratified. James Madison, in particular, was very concerned about the possibility if states had total control over federal elections, then states fundamentally could deny fair elections or deny an election at all and take down the federal government that way. And so they passed the second section of the 14th Amendment to prevent against rogue states. It says that if a state is found to have denied or abridged, including through dilution, the vote of its eligible citizen voters, that state is accountable. You said the magic A word, accountability. It says that state actually loses federal apportionment in proportion to the number of citizens whose vote was injured, whose vote was denied or diluted. Now, when you have a circumstance like in Georgia's 2022 midterm, they had 34,000 more votes counted than they had voters who voted, right? There's so many other things we know about Georgia, but let's just take that one little fact for a minute, pull it apart. You have 34,000 ballots enter the system with no tracking back to any voter whatsoever. That's 34,000 counts of felony election fraud, according to the US DOJ. What voter in Georgia was not injured? So this is very, very serious regarding accountability. And the way that the United Sovereign Americans litigation strategy works is like this. The first thing we do is we put out one final olive branch. It says, officials, we realize you inherited a junk system. And so if what you want to do right now is clean it up before 2024 and come into compliance, we'll help you. And that's what we're asking the courts to do. We're asking the courts to order the state to comply. And so, we're not just asking, because we've been asking for 4 years, right? In Georgia, Garland's been asking for 12 years or something already, and they just don't care. So
well, actually, I think like 17, but go ahead.
Right. Yeah. I get my
about
numbers.
The machine, even the machines not being constitutional, but go ahead.
Right. Exactly. So the point is we have to use the courts to try to force them. If they will not comply, the citizens are not without remedy. And this is critical to understand. The United Sovereign Americans litigation strategy ends with one of two things. It ends with total compliance or total accountability. That's how we know we've done our job. And so the mandamus is the olive branch. And then there's Title 42, Section 1983, which says we're going to charge these people if they won't follow the law. Now they're depriving the United States citizens of our fundamental civil right. And we're going to charge them with deprivation of civil rights acting under color of law. Now, fascinatingly, Title 1983 was passed as law at the same time as they had all these troubles with elections last, which was 1871. The 1868 presidential election, was a train wreck in America. And actually, there were 3 states. They tried to block those 3 states from even submitting their electoral college votes. They were so corrupt. So this isn't the first time we've gone through a major election upheaval. And what the states did, what the federal government did, this was when Congress said, look, here's the law, here's the deal. We're coming down with the hammer. You follow the law, or you are charged with these civil rights deprivations. And that's still on the books. That's still our right, you see. If they won't give us a fundamentally constitutionally reliable election, and they won't show us the receipts and prove what they say, they're accountable. What is this? Is the election denier story is like almost 4 years old now, that somehow it's our job to prove to the state that the state erred. No, it's the state's job to prove to us that they didn't err. And there are serious mechanisms to hold them personally accountable, to sanction the states in their apportionment. Apportionment is congressional representation, electoral college votes, and federal funds. That's what apportionment means. This is a big deal. And we've read all this. We've read the law. Our top tier attorney was President Trump's winning counsel in the second impeachment trial, and he was the former acting attorney general of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This is not just like, something, let's throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. This is real, people. This is James Madison's litigation strategy.
So when Ken Paxton sued after 2020, But again, I'm kind of answering my own question. He sued because the rights of his voters had been infringed on, like diluted. Why in the world did the Supreme Court not do the right thing? Does this boil down to courage too at the same time?
Right. Well, I
Marley?
will say the way that election law works, it's designed to be what's called self-adjudicating. The accuracy requirements of federal elections are so incredibly stringent that the likelihood of fraud successfully affecting any election outcome is incredibly remote. If the states were compliant with the law, there would be no post-election litigation. So if you think about it, the judges are in a position, they're being asked in a way to decide for the people, which is unconstitutional. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with what the Supreme Court did, and I'm not in a position to speak to it either because I'm not an attorney. I'm a homeschool mom who took this on because I love my country. So why did the Supreme Court choose that? I don't know, but I do know because I've read that lawsuit carefully. Believe me, we're studying it very, very carefully to look for any deficiencies. And I think the world of Attorney General Paxton, I'm not disparaging what he did. It was a tremendous act of courage and patriotism. There were some legal deficiencies in his approach, and he was fundamentally arguing about the outcome more than he was arguing about process. And Bush v. Gore taught us that when you argue about process, if you can get the process repaired, now you can trust in the outcome. And in Bush v. Gore, what happened was when they fixed the process, the outcome flipped. They didn't go in there challenging the outcome. They said, the way that these ballots are being counted doesn't look like the same way that the law says they're supposed to be counted. And the judge agreed and said, wow, you're right. So they had to go back and recount them all, and boom, now we have a new president. It's just like that.
Got it. So process is key in the obeying of the law, and that's what makes it self-adjudicating.
Exactly. Yeah, the election of actually in 1888, the Supreme Court ruled, and this is still considered good law, and it's cited multiple times in the 2017 version of the Federal Prosecution of Election Offenses. It literally says, when an election official varies from the law, that's fraud. Election fraud is nothing like securities fraud or tax fraud or anything else where you have to prove intent. The law says if an election official who has the responsibility on their shoulders for continuity of governance, for the integrity of not only our elections but our representation, right? The faith and trust in our government, which you were talking about, people have, largely abandoned. Nobody believes in our government anymore. And also, harmony and domestic tranquility. How do you get all these political factions to work together at the table and get good outcomes for America? It's because the election officials followed the law. And everyone can trust the outcome. And if you're not happy with the outcome, you got to work your tail off and do a better job next time and either get more people to understand your position or fix your position if it's just not all that popular. But when the election officials don't follow the law, all of that goes out the window. And that's what we've been experiencing. Literally, that's really what we've been experiencing for 4 years. And we have to stop it. It's hurting our children. It's hurting our future. It's hurting the meaning of America. That's and, right. If we love this country, we have to take this on. It's like, wow, it's a big pile, but what are you going to do? Get your shovel.
That's right. And that's why this all boils back down to integrity and what people have pledged their allegiance to. And I don't want to keep going back to President Trump versus this person or whatever. But it's like the term rhino. If the founders, they were smart in creating the Constitution as it is. They knew they had to tie it to something greater than us, which was God. Our rights was given to us by him. But if we have people that don't have integrity, then the process of just rolling the next person in there without integrity, that keeps being a part of the process too. Then the system will never self-adjudicate because all this goes back down to people having integrity as well.
Yeah, it's the law. And the law is the king in America. That's what Thomas Paine said before the American founding, and it's still true today. The law is the king. If people don't follow the law and we don't hold people to the law, then you get this nightmare scenario where everybody's just in it for themselves. They just think, wow, I could do whatever I want and I won't be held accountable. And you and we wouldn't take advantage of that, but we see that some people will because they're doing it right in front of our faces.
That's right. So we got another let's take one quick break. I know you got to run. You got something else, and then we're gonna get Mike in here with us and get him involved in the conversation with us too. Back in a minute.
Accelerate your business goals and brand presence on the World Wide Web by logging on to SafewayHost.store to purchase domain names, web hosting, email hosting, SSL, and more. We have 24/7 customer service and support available to our clients. Get started today so you can achieve your business goals by increasing your web presence. Log on to SafewayHost.store today. That's SafewayHost.store.
War Room, Gwinnett County, the people's voice, keeping you informed. War Room, Gwinnett County, the people's voice. All right, guys, we are back. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Like this video. Let's help boost it up in the algorithm. We have some great guests on here today. I am learning a ton right now of information, and make sure you share this video because before 2020 I was kind of like, hey, maybe you guys were way more dug in, but the guests that we try to bring on here, they're versed in the areas that they're working in. They put a lot of time. There's a lot of sacrifice that goes into the process of getting the information, going through it, vetting it, and all of that. So I just want to thank everybody that's ever come on the show, and the guests that we have definitely on here today. So Marley, you're in New York, right? Is that where you're at right now? Okay,
that's correct. I live in New York.
Okay, so you're in New York, but your organization spans all over, and you have different representatives in the area, IT specialists, and everything like that. So in here in studio with me, we have Mike Nixon, who's a part of the organization. So Mike, welcome to the War Room, and can you tell people a little bit about you and what you do and some of your credentials and everything like that?
Well, thanks, Antonio. You're phenomenal, and you're like so many of us. Once you start hearing it, you don't unhear it, and you keep learning. And I started like you in 2020. I was like, what's going on? And so my background is in IT. And as I was learning things through David Cross, who was on the voter GA calls, which I got on early because I knew that was where information was. David was teaching things, I was learning, and then Kevin Monclaw was teaching us. Jason Frazier is another one that doesn't get enough credit sometimes, and Joe Rossi, and Garland, of course. There's so many people. Anyway, it just had a big effect. So I was digging into things on my own on the IT side of things, and I don't know if so many people have heard of Draza Smith. And Draza was doing PID controller analysis because that's her engineering background. So I was kind of focused on the machine side of the world. But as I learned more and more, and from people in Georgia, I got to see the bigger picture. And so much of what's been accomplished with the SEB, et cetera, is for these folks that have just been doing this for so long. And one of the things on one of the voter GA calls in the first of this year, I heard Marley. Marley came in, and she explained the United Sovereigns Americans groups all across the country and the strategies of holding people accountable. And that's part of what I hadn't heard up to this point. And I've always tried to figure out what's my place in this. As we all know, we're made for this time. So what's my role? And so I've signed up as a volunteer on the website. Gave them my areas of expertise that I see, And so over 25 years of IT and project management, working with databases, building them, analyzing them, making sure they're correct. And I got a call from one of the other state chapter directors, Rebecca Bennett, and she said, Mike, I kind of need some help on the IT side of things. We're trying to build a scorecard, which is something that is kind of standard across these states, which investigate the voter rolls. And I've got 2 guys and more coming that I need to build a team with, but I need a project manager. Would you be interested? Why don't you think about it? I said, I don't have to think about it. I'm in. So it was after I heard Marley talk that I realized this is where I belong right now. And sure enough, I'm glad I'm retired because I don't have time for much anything else. But thanks to Marley. But she works us all.
Wait, so both of us laughed at the same time because we both understand that language. We were just talking about that with your wife when you guys first got here. It's an amazing amount of time to put in to do our civic duty. That's why you guys deserve a lot of credit and kudos for what you put in.
Well, when you see people like David Cross, BK Pritchard, these people are heroes and they are nonstop. I go to bed at night feeling guilty that I haven't done enough, But the team that we've built here in Georgia, they're phenomenal. We have over 90 years of IT expertise. And these are people that have the expertise in databases. And they're people who've been digging into the state's voter rolls and voter histories for years. And they have been asking for solutions, fix this, and they get nowhere. Jason Frazier was sending me reports for Coweta County that I could take to my local county elections director. Here's registrations of people who were born in 1900. I don't think so. And asking them to fix it, and the responses that was consistent, and people consistently get this in all kinds of places. Forsyth is a great example. That's not our job. Secretary of States give us this information. Well, when you hear the Secretary of State talk about whose job it is, they're pointing in the other direction. So there's a lot of people not taking responsibility for this and not being held accountable.
So let's talk about voter rolls, because I know that's a big thing. The accountability, definitely what you do, Marley, and everything. So let's talk about the voter rolls and how you actually interface and what you actually do with the organization in conjunction with what Marley does.
Well, part of what the national group, and this is we the people of the sovereign states, have set up these teams. It's not Marley pushing it down. These are people organically coming together as patriots in their states, and they are diving into these voter rolls. Now, I talk about our expertise in Georgia. There's over 700 years of experience in IT across this country in the 25 states chapters. So these are people with PhDs. They're professors. These guys know what they're doing. So when we actually dig into the voter rolls, we come out with the results. We pass that up and around to all of these other states and say, vet this with us. So they have vetted what we have found. And so the details of what we found are pretty astounding, like they are in all these states.
So let's talk about a little bit of that. How bad is Georgia, Marley? I don't know if that's a bad question. I don't know how encouraging that question sounds just now.
Well, I think we ended up with the Georgia scorecard has about 500,000 facially invalid registrations sitting right there, ready to vote. And a facially invalid registration means that's a technical term that means it looks like garbage. You can tell it's garbage because it's obvious. So these are the people, like Mike said, registered to vote or born on January 1st, 1900, registered to vote before they were born, registered to vote after they voted already. You guys know about all this in Georgia. You've been looking at this for years. The question is not whether or not this represents a comprehensive list maintenance approach. The question is, how in the heck did these get in the databases in the first place? When the Department of Justice says it's a felony to register a fictitious registrant or to use false or inaccurate information to register someone to vote, they say that's a felony, one count. So we're saying, hey, here's 500,000 potential felonies. We're not saying they're definitely felonies because we can't get anybody to investigate, but we're saying this sure looks like a hot mess. And, the other concern, obviously, is that, 239,000 of them voted in the 2022 midterm. 239,000 people, or ostensible people, whose registration records don't meet any standard of law. And I want to talk about this January 1st registration issue because in Georgia, you have a similar problem to what you have up in Ohio, which is that generally these garbage looking registrations, they vote at about a 40 to 45% turnout rate. But your January 1st registrants, they are really, really serious about voting. They love America. They are really civic minded individuals. It turns out if you are registered on January 1st, you have roughly an 86% turnout rate. So a radically different behavior from this particular cohort of facially invalid registrants. And the states, they generally say, oh, that's a default date. Well, you know what? The law doesn't accommodate for something like a default date. And they say, well, the default date is because, back in the day when we were like congregating in Conestoga wagons, we didn't all have to give the registrars our registration date because they knew us because we were in the same wagon, having fry bread. Well, guess what? It's 2024 and there's no law that says that's okay. And there's no law that says it can happen 71,000 times in the state of Georgia in the 2022 midterm. So you're not following the law. That's it. We're not going out and arguing about whether, if you are going to tell us this is 71,000 legal votes, you better show us the receipts. You better show us that you actually know who these people are. They actually exist and they actually did come in and cast a legitimate lawful vote and you just screwed up the recording and accounting of it.
So let's just assume that the bad actors are going to do more bad acts going into 24. So what is it that the citizens of Georgia can do or do with and through your organization to make sure that things are, put back in the right place per se? Because people they're gonna say, oh, you want to overturn elections. They're gonna say all this stuff. And no, we're trying to follow the Constitution and have one person and one vote. So I know I'm preaching to the choir right now, but we're going to combat that narrative and say, no, we want to have one person, one vote, and we're not going to allow you to steal this country.
Yeah, well, there's two things that United Sovereign Americans offers to folks who want to get involved. And one of them is to come in and be a volunteer and participate in our advocacy program, which is bringing our resolution for a legally valid 2024 election to all of your local, state, and county level officials. Now, that's not to say that people in Georgia haven't been, wearing themselves to a pulp trying to talk to these people. It's just that you're bringing the specific legal facts and historical facts with you this time in the context of the data. So if people want to participate in that process and help educate our officials and our representatives about what is a legally valid election, that's a great way that people can participate. And another way people can participate, obviously, is to support our litigation efforts, which are extensive. And again, like I said, right now, the mandamus lawsuit asking the courts to order states to follow the law has been filed in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida. We're going to be filing next in North Carolina, Texas, and Michigan. And then we've got Georgia and Colorado in the hopper. Those are drafting right now. So if people want to support an effort that's designed to force adjudication at the Supreme Court or designed to make sure we have standing during the 2024 election administrative process. On the off chance that election officials don't change their tune in the next, 78 days, we will have the opportunity to file against the certification of what we know will be inaccurate and legally invalid returns. And also, it gives us the opportunity to say, well, we tried to get them to follow the law. They won't. And now they're dead to rights. This is a civil rights crisis. It has nothing to do with outcome or party or candidate. It has to do with providing the United States citizenry with our, fundamental right, which is to choose our representatives. And there's no meaning to putting a piece of paper in a box, or not even a piece of paper, to pushing a bunch of computer buttons, and then you're not allowed to have any transparency or any certainty that you actually exercise that fundamental right. So those are the key things that we ask for. We asked for, financial support for our litigation. We really need it. We're never going to quit. We're never going to let up until we win. And then we ask for your help. If people want to come in and be advocates and learn about legally valid elections, go for it. We would love to have you on the team. It's actually really fun.
All right. So we know you got to run. You got some number of other things that you have to do today. So can you tell people, is there anything else that you want to share? And if not, you can tell people how to follow you and support the organization.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Antonio, for having me and Mike on. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you and meet you, get to know you a little bit. And thank you for your concern for our country. And thanks to all the people in Georgia doing such incredible work. And of course, we always want to thank Dr. Jan Johnston, an amazing patriot, and the others on the state election board in Georgia, setting the standard for the country to look at. And otherwise, I just want to encourage people you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @MarleyHornik, or you can go and find our website, unite4freedom.com, unite4freedom.com.
Thank you for hanging out with us today. Me and Mike, we're going to hang around and have a little bit more of, Georgia talk, and just kind of talk about what's going on and everything like that. But thank you for coming by today.
Thank you.
All right. So, guys, the work that they're doing is so important. And what is so despicable is we have individuals in high levels of government in the top brass right here in the state of Georgia that is basically, with the rule that passed the other day. Let's break that down again. There's 3 places that need to match. The numbers need to match. The number of people that came and checked in needs to match with the number on top of that machine that you actually put your ballot into and cast your ballot. And when you put that ballot in there, the number on the top should go up by 1. Okay, that's 1, the vote that you put in. So that number on top of the machine needs to match with the number of ballots in the actual machine. So when we see representatives in the state of Georgia that are coming out against rules like this is basically what they're saying. Okay, let's talk about it in terms of having a job at like a hamburger joint. You're basically saying, hey, and when the voter rolls are not clean as well. So let's add that to the equation right now. So what they're saying is, we don't care if organizations like United Sovereign Americans is telling you that, hey, dude, you got $10,000 worth of monopoly money in your drawer, but we just want you to go ahead and add that up, and we'll figure it out and adjudicate all this stuff later on. Absolutely incredible, and it's rife for fraud. And then the next question that we have to ask them, Mike, is why don't we just need to take care of this now? You have people beating on the doors, screaming, saying, hey, the voter rolls are dirty. We don't trust the machines. Another gentleman that was on here a week or so ago said that, no, this is one of the things that I believe Debbie Dooley tried to get done. Or was it Debbie? Can't remember. Might have been Jason Frazier. But anyway, they were trying to get an update done to the machine. I think this was Debbie. Update your software, Secretary of State, at the very minimum, or at least until you do it. Let's have you say that let's make a rule at the state election board to say we'll have hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballots until this guy decides he wants to update the machine. Why does it seem like there's no real appetite? I know it's appetite amongst the people that are fighting for election integrity. So I never want to take anything from all the efforts that real people are trying to do.
Well, it's really frustrating because who can understand the why? The answer to it. It's incomprehensible why somebody would not want to do that. And you talked about the upgrade that somebody had mentioned. I believe we're 7 software iterations behind in the Dominion system and 5 years. Now, anybody owns a PC, would you let your PC go 6 months without any new files to protect your machine or your security that's built into the software? No, you wouldn't do that. And there are known flaws in this system that were demonstrated in the Curling versus Raffensperger case by Ricardo and by proxy, basically Garland, which attested to the Williamson error, which is what I first heard from David Cross back 3 years ago.
So tell us what the Williamson error is again for all us newcomers.
Well, it's in 21, Williamson County, Tennessee, a very sharp election worker found that, imagine, she compared the votes of the voters coming in with the tabulator tapes. All right, is exactly what we're talking about this rule change to do. She found that they were not correct, and when she investigated it, she realized that one particular scanner missed 60% of the ballots being counted, not just 1 or 2, but 60%. So the Secretary of State came in, couldn't figure it out. They brought in the Election Assistance Commission. They recreated that process exactly the way they had done it, and they got the exact same results. And they found that, and Dominion couldn't answer the question what was going on because they used Dominion up there, and they used the 5.5B version. They determined that they couldn't use that software anymore, so they didn't. They went to the newer version of software, which apparently fixed it. Georgia has never moved beyond where we are. Now, we are on 5.5A. I've been pushing my particular county commission and my elections director, pay attention to this Williamson error, but they don't want to. This last week, though, I finally got a response because I've been copying the county commissioners. I've been telling them this for 1.5 years in front of them. There is this problem. Let's count the ballots at least. We would rather count the votes on the ballots, the printed part, because nobody trusts the QR codes. They are illegal. Let's count this. Well, they still ignored that. The elections director, in a response to me this time, reached out to the Secretary of State. They quoted Dominion's response to the Williamson error. Well, it's probably this, and most likely it is this particular part of the process that's causing that. Okay? Now,
let me ask a question. Has there ever been an official poll that you know of if the people really wanted to move to hand-counted, hand-marked paper ballots? Or has it just always been a group and made to look like it's just a group of people who, want this out of, maybe the majority? Because I've never, has this ever come up to say, let's really ask the people what they really want?
No, I don't. I have not seen anything like that. I know there has been a Rasmussen poll. Too many people do say they trust the machine counts, but an equally or greater number don't. And the poll that Rasmussen has done over this last year, 80% of Republicans don't trust that there wasn't fraud in the 2020 election. 40% of Democrats, 56% of independents, for an average of about 54% of the voters don't believe that the election was fair in 2022. And that same percentage say it's not going to be in 2024. That to me is the most concerning polling. The people do not have any faith in this. And so,
Does this boil down to basic chain of custody? Because it's my theory is unless we were willing to deploy, because we get into all this, people should go to the polls and be poll watchers and poll workers. I agree with all that. But is it a lot above this person's level of understanding once it goes? We would have to deploy a cyber person or a computer kind of IT expert at every single polling location. Not only that, but that actually has access, because once stuff goes into a machine or to the digital realm, you're not watching it anymore. It's virtually impossible to watch at that point. Once it goes on that card in seclusion, that's difficult again. And I'm not saying something that's happened in between, but I just think that we're not really living in a reality of being able to watch it. Just think about your bank account for a minute. You go, you take cash to the bank, okay, and you put the money in the ATM. So it counts, hey, Mr. Nixon, he put in $5 bills, so that's $25. He put in two $100 bills, so that's what, $255, right? So the fact that the machine knows what you put in there, that's like our cast vote record or whatever, but at any point in time, you can go and pull up your account and look at it kind of at will. I don't know how much latitude a poll worker has to know. I'm glad they got the rule passed. At least they can count how many people came in. So that's a step towards at least having a real valid point of argument. Because I don't think before this rule passed that we would have had that.
right, and I think Garland was the one that implemented that rule or suggested it.
Yeah, and I think Sally Grubbs and a few other people kind of Dave, they kind of
Yeah, and I don't want to say who was, but the team, there was a team effort in all of this.
Yeah.
But back to the Williamson error, I think that was one of Garland's main focuses of why this rule is important.
Yeah.
Do we have a problem in Georgia? We don't know because nobody's done this. But back to your bank account issue or parallel, as Marley said, we've almost got 250,000 votes, apparent voter violations that we've identified, and our data team here in Georgia has given SOS's records. This isn't our data, just our analysis, that we say these are apparent voter violations. What if your bank account had a 6% error rate every month? Would that be acceptable to you? I've lost 6% of my money. I guess I'll just forget about that. No.
The goal in that scenario is zero. That we don't want to have, and the bank don't want to have any errors. So that's why I'm appalled that some of the people in these leadership positions that's not trying to get that number down to zero. The goal is to have zero ineligible people on the voter list.
Right. And so when Marley, she talks about the law, I've learned so much law just by being in this group for this short amount of time. So the Help America Voter Act of 2002, what does it say about the allowable amount of error? It says 1 in every 125,000 ballots can be in error. Now, in Georgia, we had an election in 2022. There were 4 million votes, roughly. That works out to, we could have had 32 ballots in error. But we find that we are saying we've got 239,000. That's 7,600 times the allowable error rate in Georgia. That, somebody's got to look at that. That's a that's a federal election law, violation. And it's a violation against our civil rights.
Yeah.
Now, you jump to what's in the machines. Again, I started from the machine side of this discovery. It's still an enigma, but Jeff O'Donnell evaluated with Dr. Dougherty the machine, or at least the data from Tina Peters out in Colorado, Mason, Colorado. And when you look at their reports, you find that there had been machine manipulation inside that database. The database was copied, the database was deleted, a new one was added, 25,000 votes in, but there's no realistic ballots that have been imaged. They were imaged by the machine, inside of the machine, not from an image taken by the ballot. Those are my words. That's my understanding.
All right. So the breakdown of that is, guys, that's, us that's on baby food like me. So when you put your vote in the machine, that's not what's making your cast vote record or record digital version of your vote that you put in the tabulator. So the actual computer system is outside of that, and it was making the image rather than the tabulation machine? Is that what you're saying?
In this particular case, the way I understand it, and I'm getting out over my skis, but what Jeff documented was that the ballots do get put in and imaged.
Okay.
But there were 25,000 that were deleted, and a new database was created in the middle of this, or beginning of this election. Those 25,000 ballots were brought back in somehow electronically with different timestamps and by the machine. Now, I have stated more than my knowledge, but if you read Jeff's reports, there is clear evidence that machine manipulation has happened in the past. Has it gone on in Georgia? We have no idea. But it's just what people suspect. It's not transparent. That's the main point. We just don't know. Why don't we know? As we the people, why don't we know exactly what happens in the ballot? Is the QR code equal to the vote that is printed out on the ballot? And that's what you hear a lot. We have paper ballots. But that isn't what gets counted. It's the QR code that somehow we're supposed to trust, that has the correct votes that we have put through the BMDs. And is that what's really getting counted? Well, we just have no idea because there's no transparency.
Are BMDs necessary in your view? Or should people just come in and just, would this simplify the process and help for audits and forensic audits later to eliminate the BMDs, just per person, unless you're disabled, that's probably would be a small percentage of people. But just get a piece of paper and get you a good old number 2 pencil and fill your bubble in.
Right.
And even if you still putting it in the machine to read it, you have a forensic now track of, rather than having a perfect printout by some machine that's printed your bubble in for you. Because this is the thing, and we know this, everybody's bubble is going to be identical. So there's no forensic trail, potentially for later, people could argue the point. And this will work for people that are saying, hey, this group of people, you lost the election. Hey, look at all these bubbles. None of them are identical because every scribble, every 4 million of them are uniquely different, just like a fingerprint.
Except for the fact, and I hate to go down this road of detail in the machines because I am not an expert by any stretch, but there are examples within the machines that will print a human look-alike bubble fill in. And they say they do that for testing purposes. So there are capabilities of machines. If you've got a falsified ballot, for example, a machine can fill out a ballot and it looks like somebody has done it, that it's not perfect. But they've also, I believe, have seen a replication of that same pattern on multiple ballots. But again, I can't swear to that, and I don't want to say much more about that. Your point, though, is auditability. And this is where Garland, David, Jeff Fulgham is another one. These guys know this process. They know what we need to be able to audit. And we do not have that capability right now, from my understanding, of a clear audit because we don't have the paper ballots. That's the way I understand it.
Yeah. And then that would be each a unique indentation if a person hand filled in the bubble,
right,
at minimum.
Right.
Just get rid of the BMDs, and I think that would open up the floodgates for more validity on the whole process. And to the people that's watching this that might think that the election integrity people are a bunch of quacks and kooks sitting around trying to find something to do because they've retired now, or ain't got like me, like, when I get off work, I'm just looking for something to get into and start a fight on Facebook or something. This would help eliminate a whole lot of that. But I think the reality comes down to having a corruptible measure in place by the power structure in order to maintain power and take it away from the people. And President Trump, he got attacked. They put a target on his back when he first came down the escalator, and when he did that speech saying that he was going to return the power to the people. And they didn't like that. And that's what it's all boiled down to. And that's why so many people have gone to jail. We had Jeff Clark on here a few weeks ago talking about all the stuff that he'd been through in the FBI and all this other stuff. But they've gone after the people who have touted election integrity. Why? Because it is the closest thing to the levers of power. And in order to control people and subvert people's rights, the uniparty establishment, globalist elites, they have to maintain the power and keep these elections corrupted.
Both sides benefit.
Yeah. Both sides are benefiting.
Well, and the Michelle Long Spears story of DeKalb County.
Where she did get one vote? Is that it?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, think about that. She, by logic, required that recount, right? So they brought out those paper ballots, they counted them and realized the count was off tremendously, and she won. So there was a mistake, apparently, or it looks like, in the way the election definition files were created because somebody dropped out. Nobody really has said exactly what it was. But nonetheless, how many other precincts has that happened in that nobody knows about? How many? We don't know, because we're not auditing things by at least counting the Dominion paper ballot of votes to compare to the actual votes. We've been asking that in our county commission meetings for a year and a half, as I've said, saying, look, let us help you, because everybody's trained. It's not hard to do. And we've been having trainings. We've got tons of people ready. Let us count those ballots with the oversight of the elections director, because chain of custody is extremely important, but that can be handled. Let us count them so that we can be confident that there's not machine errors.
So wait, when they say, yeah, we're gonna give you a audit or some risk limiting audit, is that could that be classified as a joke in your mind, or how not just a risk limiting audit, but how can we audit these things properly? Are you? It doesn't look like they can be, unless we get rid of this BMD. I think that would definitely open the door, just in my opinion, for us to be able to better audit this situation, even if they wanted a machine to count it or whatever the case may be. And then you can still, have people watch the machine and everything else, the custody from that point all the way up to the Secretary of State. No problem. It's like, have we gotten that inadequate to where we need a machine to fill a bubble in for us? And I understand too, when we have all of these what they call it, jungle elections or whatever, or you got all these bubbles to fill out. But hey, let's just sit down and fill them out. I mean, are we gonna do that? Are we gonna trade in convenience for lack of security? And it's just a decision that I think that the system is making, in my view, for the people, rather than making security a priority. But hey, maybe it's a group of people that don't want the security. You said people benefit on both sides, to have corrupted situations.
Well, I don't think they want the people to have control. This is a centralized system dictated by the Secretary of State. And the counties are afraid to do anything on their own because they're threatened with lawsuits. I mean, why would the State Secretary of State require them to do one thing one particular way? One is convenience for the state, but another part is the control of it. If your citizenry isn't satisfied that it is transparent, then give them the transparency within the county. That's part of the law to do that. But the attorneys for the counties they don't want to go out on any limbs either. So they're not advising the county commissioners that way as well. You mentioned the risk limiting audit and how to best audit. Now, like I've said so many times today, I'm not the expert in this, but there's plenty of patriots in Georgia who've been fighting for correct audits. What I advise anybody to do is read the summation arguments of the Curling versus Raffensperger trial that finished up, I think, in the first part of February.
Where can people find that?
It's on the Federalist Papers. That's where I found it.
Okay.
I don't know exactly beyond that.
When you get the links for that, we'll put that in the description so
Absolutely.
people can find it.
Now, people freak out that it's so many pages, but in these transcriptions, they're very narrow pages. They're double spaced. They're not hard to read, and it doesn't take long. But one of the experts that had been called in that trial, and it's reiterated in the summation by the plaintiff's defense, he, as I understand it, created the risk limiting audit process and protocol. And what he says is that Georgia is not doing it correctly, and they cannot get an accurate risk limiting audit the way it's being done. Now, again, I'd like somebody else to back me up on that knows this so much better than I. But that was part of that summation. So, yeah, I'll get that to you, Antonio, because that to me was so telling. It's so comprehensive of all of the different testimonies that are so impactful and so important to understand, how broke the system is. And I'm talking about the computer system as documented by Halderman and these other experts that showed it right there in front of the judge. So, it's way past due. And you're back to your question, why is nobody doing it? It's because they haven't been held accountable.
Yeah.
And so what Marley's efforts led in all these different states, these independent, we the peoples in each of these sovereign states, are taking upon ourselves to take a model, but own it with the data that we found in our state, and moving toward holding the state election officials accountable for these gross numbers that we've just gone over today. And she alluded to the lawyer, Bruce Castor Jr. He's built a template for all of us states. It's a process that is going to get us standing. And everybody feels very good about this. And these lawsuits are coming one right after the other.
All right. So, all right, here's where we are based on, let me digest all of that. We don't need any more reports, information, data, none of that. It's plenty out there.
Yes.
It's plenty out there. What we need is accountability, and we need to start putting a torch to some of these individuals who are violating their oaths of office and not following the process of the Constitution. There's more than enough information out here. I don't know if I want to see another report. I'm gonna be honest with you.
No.
I want to see some people go to jail for violating law, held accountable, fined. And until that starts happening, nothing's going to change. It's just going to be, oh, well, we got another report. We got another report, or another group started. No. We need the people, the top brass in this state to do their job. That's from the attorney general all the way down. And we need more people talking about it, applying pressure, and speaking on it. This boils back down to the choice again. And no, it's never easy to have dissension amongst the brethren. But this is be honest. Some people in the party is not brethren. They're not. And as a sports guy, there were always yelling and arguments in the locker room. But these people, they're on the field of play for us. And it's like, we'll sit up and yell at the television if the quarterback for Georgia throws an interception, but you can't say something to a politician. This is absolutely ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? So when I hear people say things like that, now we try to be respectful as we can, but for crying out loud, the country is on fire. The state, you know, all this, some of the stuff that we see happening, and I spoke to someone probably about a week ago, even just about Gwinnett County. These areas are being changed, and they're doing it by way of these illegitimate election processes that they're doing. Her words was Gwinnett County was not voted out because the school board and all this in 2020. How ironic is this? You got the same Marxist people getting getting elected on school boards across the whole entire country. If banks started getting robbed all over the place, it's one got robbed in New York, the same bank got robbed down in Georgia, in 5 different places. That don't look suspicious. Yeah. It looks like coordination because guess what? That's what it is. You know, and people, if you hadn't, and thank you to my beautiful wife, she always sends me stuff to listen to while I'm working. And I had heard a number of things about Marxism, Karl Marx, but she sent me a video by a gentleman out of Birmingham by the name of Larry Taunton, and he just kind of went, through the whole thing and how Marxism and socialism is the opposite and a combatant to Christianity. He broke it all down and talked about how it's actually thievery. But see, the thievery starts with stealing your vote. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
The change, because the average person is not going to wake up, and there's nothing wrong with being a good Samaritan. You know, we are to help others, but to be obligated to take the money that you worked and retired for and pay taxes for some bum sitting down the street on the couch who's able-bodied to work. And the government's telling you, you need to, you see how none of this stuff makes sense? And I know I'm getting off on a tangent, but this is what all this stuff boils down is to the thievery of our rights, our opportunity, our wealth in our country. That's what all this stuff boils down to. And that's why elections, contests are so hot. It's because we have a group of people struggling for power. And one of them is probably doing nefarious things, and other maybe trying to do what's right for the people. And that's what this whole thing boils down to. And that's why election integrity is so important. Because people died for this country to be here.
What's a fundamental civil right? Fundamental. That it's like Marley said, it's in this second line of the Constitution. It couldn't be more important. Now, the group, like you said, it's hard not to shout from the rooftops, right? And that's what I was doing early on. I was angry. I'm still angry, but I'm channeling that anger by sharing facts and pushing data and pushing law. And that's the focus of United Sovereign. It is, we put our cap on, is what we say here. We are, oh heck, now I can't think of what the C stands for, but very polite, basically. We're accurate and we're powerful. So it is a fundamental process that we do things the right way, and we do things in order to get results. And results in this case, in our opinion, is holding people accountable.
That's right. Well, hey, it's been great hanging out with you. Do you what is this popping up here? Do you want to share the website links? I know you got a Twitter and some other pages and everything for people to be able to follow you and get information. I know there's one for Unite Sovereign Americans, right?
Yes,
right.
Unite and S Americans
okay.
is really what you need to follow. I'm really a nobody on X, but that's the place you need to go to follow what's going on in Georgia and other places in the country, because it all meshes together.
Yeah, I got it. So we'll definitely get those links up.
Well, thank you, Antonio. It's fascinating to continue to meet. I'm always amazed at how many more people. You know, you'd think you'd run into everybody by now.
Oh, yeah.
But there's just so many more people doing this work. You had Bob Coover on.
Oh, yeah, I had Bob.
And I never knew a Bob, but he's doing great things. And
oh, man.
So
that information Bob shared was quite interesting.
Right. So it's just, I really appreciate you having the commitment that you do.
Well, my job is not that difficult. It's not really at all. I mean, you guys are, getting the data and everything like that. I show up, I put signs in the ground, for people and try to keep up with everything. But this is a fascinating time, isn't it?
It is.
What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive.
To win, lose, or draw, we win in the end anyway. But just on this planet, to be able to say, you fought for your country and put it all on the line and did everything that you can do within in your capacity. So I'm excited. I really am.
I am too. And how many people that you've met who've woken up would ever want to go back to sleep? Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to unsee what they've seen, and nobody wants to stop until we get this right.
That's right. It's definitely our time. All right, so I'm gonna get ready to close the show out. So I appreciate you hanging out, and pleasure meeting your wife and everything like that.
And really getting to know a little bit. I know it's a deep story. I only got to know you just a little bit, and I hope to continue to get to know you more.
Oh yeah. Let's do it. All right, so guys, like I said, we're gonna be hammering away at election integrity, and I guess it's just a football player and I guess old school coach spirit in me, and I'd rather not be, on the microphone, frustrated in talking about these things, but this is just where we at right now. We have to put and channel our energy, like Mike said, channel it into action, and I yell at the TV sometimes, back when I was, watching the games and, different stuff, but we have to get a little bit more thicker skinned people for such a time as this. I mean, it takes iron to forge iron, and that's just where we at. And if we got public officials that they ain't made out of nothing, they scared about what some guy said about them and stuff like that, that might not be your guy. Not for this time. I mean, is this the guy you want to stand in the gap and fight for the future of your children and your grandchildren right now, who's mad about something some guy said about him or whatever, instead of focusing in on the task at hand and doing the right thing? How you gonna explain that to your grandkids and when the country's lost and ruined? I supported a guy, he got mad one time, so he decided to pull his machine or whatever from behind the candidate that everybody know we needed. How you gonna explain that and square that? You can't. Let me answer the question for you. We got to toughen up, get in our word, and stand on something that's principled right now and hold people accountable, like Marley said earlier. We don't have a choice. And to the people that sit around and God has he's had his plan since before the beginning of time. Okay, and I'm blessed that we'll be raptured away together. But there's no provision in that word that tells you to sit around and talk about how these things are supposed to, all these things are going to happen. No, you need to get off your hiney and get involved, have some guts, do the right thing, and support organizations like the ones that Marley and Mike work for. You have a charge, you have a duty, and especially men. What we see right now going on, we need to take that on our backs and carry the torch right now for the future generations. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe. Tell somebody about the War Room. We'll see you guys on the next one.
War Room, Gwinnett County. The people's voice, keeping you informed. War Room, Gwinnett County. The people's voice.